Is it just me, or is train racing less common than this musical thinks it is? We seem to be in this era of theatre at the moment where we are taking on board the past work of Andrew Lloyd Webber and are trying to breathe new life into these musicals. Not all of them have worked, but some of the runaway hits have been the recent revival of Sunset Boulevard at the Savoy, directed by Jamie Lloyd, stripping back the staging to find a new angle on that story. Right now in New York, we have the revival of Cats, taking the classic musical and putting it into the ballroom scene, and finding the parallels between that performance style and the musical. And next up, to get a new breath of life, is Starlight Express. This classic musical premiered in London all the way back in the 80s, and was unlike anything theatre had seen before. And now, in a slightly smaller venue, the Troubadour Wembley Park Theatre, Starlight has been reborn. Now, I am someone who comes into this revival not having seen the original. I was too young for that. I didn't see it, I don't know it, and this is my first real experience with Starlight Express. So, did it impress me? Do I understand the hype behind Starlight now? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet, and that is a hard task, I know. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets and tier lists, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's talk about the musical about trains. It's actually quite easy for me to group what I really like about Starlight Express and what I was less sold on, which was quite a surprise for me. I found myself warming to this material a lot more than I actually thought I would. Starlight Express has a very simple premise. It is about trains. These are trains, we're in a child's imagination, it's all being thought up by this kid, and these trains are gonna race. But there is one train who is the underdog of the trains, and that is Rusty, the old steam train. Can Rusty beat the juggernauts of the engine world and win the race and win the heart of Pearl? And that is Starlight Express. There's really not much more to it than that. To say that this plot is thin is a little bit of an understatement. But to be fair, that's probably the intention. It feels like with the demographic that they are aiming this musical towards, that's kind of the direction they needed to go in. This is very clearly a musical that is being aimed towards children. I mean, if you look into the history of it, it was written specifically for Andrew Lloyd Webber's son. Starlight Express is very clearly going a bit more for style over substance. And so, with that, the only thing that really holds me back from saying with my full chest that this is a 5-star musical is the fact that this story is very thin. The plot starts off, and I feel like its best comparison is something like Cats. We are introduced one by one to these different trains, and they sing a song. You get introduced to the different types of engine, from electric to steam. You get introduced to the passenger trains, and what they're about, and their different reasons for being a train, I don't know. You get introduced to the freight trains, the cargo trains. And that's really what the main crux of Act 1 is, bringing you into these different trains and basically them being like, this is why I'm a good train. I'm a good train for this reason. Aren't I cool? I'm gonna win the race and then I'm gonna slay. But then it kind of feels like they run out of trains. They feel like, you know, Cats completely has enough cats that the whole musical can be Cats, and there is no plot. Whereas Starlight Express introduces about 5 different types of trains and then goes, we have no more trains left. I guess we need a plot now. And so, once you get past the introductions, you get the relationship between Rusty and Pearl. This kind of love story that happens very quickly. It's essentially the bare minimum of a love story that you need for it to be dubbed as a love story. And the main thing of the musical, the main meat on the bones, is the race and Rusty's determination to prove that steam is still a viable engine. They're great. They're going to do it. You know, they can do anything that the electric and the other ones can do. And then he does it. Cool. I'm glad. So as you can see, there's just not really much to Starlight Express. And the thing is, I don't think that's a massive problem when you know the fact that I don't think there is meant to be much more to Starlight Express. I think if I was sitting here and I was looking at it and going, oh, you're missing this, you're missing this, you're missing this, where are these really important beats? I'd probably be more angry or more frustrated at the musical for missing it out. But I mean, I can't think of much more you can really add to the concept of trains and they race. I think they take it about as far as you probably can. But I will say I wasn't sold on a lot of the different story beats within that. I found Rusty and Pearl's relationship to be okay. They're not a love couple for the ages, and I feel like the musical only gives it just enough time for it to have just a little bit of weight to the story. Part of this also being down to the fact that I don't really get much character from Pearl. She feels like a little bit of a product of the time it was initially written. I actually find the other main relationship in the musical a little bit more interesting, this being between Greaseball and Dinah. Greaseball being very jock-like, and Dinah just having this absolute obsession over her, which actually leads to a lot of really fun moments, and a song called Uncoupled, which I actually think is one of the most endearing songs in this musical. Whereas Pearl feels like she doesn't have much intention behind what she's doing. She starts off having this connection with Rusty a little bit. There's a spark between them. There's a spark on the track. You know, you can tell there's a decent bit of chemistry between them, but then 2 songs later and she's suddenly just, you know, going along with anyone. So you're sitting there wondering, was there actually a connection? Or does Pearl just like anyone who's a bit flashy? They try and add some stuff in there. They try and add a little bit of like a push and pull, but I really don't feel like there's enough grounding it for me to actually really engage with that plot line. I actually think some of the intentions are a problem throughout, and the thing that really stopped me from fully connecting with this story as much as I feel like I possibly could have. It's like the character of Slick, right? Slick kind of appears in the background within Act 1 in certain elements, and they seem like they're an ally, and then suddenly in Act 2, they're just like, by the way, I'm going to help you stop Rusty from racing, because he's actually going to be really good, and yeah, I'm your friend now. And it's like, where did this come from? Then there's the idea of coupling. So to race in these races, you have to have a partner. And there's a whole thing with the partnership where there's betrayal. I mean, Rusty is really upset that Pearl chooses someone else to race with, and Dinah feels a little bit upset that Greaseball chooses someone else to race with. So there's that implication that there's a romantic thing between the couplings, but some of them are just random. But the thing about coupling that really felt like a plot hole was the whole idea that you need a couple to partner with, yeah, but then in the final race, Greaseball just ditches her partner. So if this is a rule, and you can't do the race without a partner, surely ditching your partner means that you would be disqualified. I don't know if I'm following the wrong train of thought here. That's a pun. But surely Greaseball broke the rules. I don't know. There's an implication that Rusty hates his own name as well. Like, they call him Rusty, and he's like, don't call me Rusty, but also that is my name. And everyone's just going to refer to me as Rusty throughout this entire rest of the musical. And then there's Starlight Express. Watching this musical, I still don't know what Starlight Express is. I don't know. If anyone can tell me, I would love to know. I would assume from the way they speak about it, it is just some like godlike ethereal thing. Honestly, going into it, I thought Starlight Express was the name of the race. Apparently, it is not. Is it like the Heaviside layer in Cats, where it is just this unknowable type of thing? Is Starlight Express death? This is the implication I've now put myself on comparing it to the Heaviside layer. is Starlight Express train god? Is there a god of trains? If there is a god of trains, what type of engine do they use? And so this is kind of showing my point that the more you think about Starlight Express, the more that you try and comprehend this story, the more holes start to form within it. And there comes a point when you're looking at this musical where you kind of just have to shut off the analytical part of your brain and just go, it's a train musical written for children. Why are you looking at it this seriously? I think on the whole, it's very evident that the plot of Starlight Express is the weakest element to it. I think it does just enough. It does just enough to keep you on board. And at the end of the day, the plot to Starlight Express is more there to be able to hold up what this show is really about, which is the trains, the racing, and the spectacle of it. There are, however, really good and interesting things that they have done and switched around with this production in order to try and modernize it a bit. So, in previous productions of Starlight Express, which, from looking into it, oh my god, there's a lot more versions of Starlight Express than I thought. They have rewritten and reworked and changed trains in this musical so many times. I don't know if it's because I have next to normal on the brain, but looking and trying to see which trains are in which version feels like I'm listening to the speech that Dr. Fine gives at the start of My Psychopharmacologist and I, where it's like the round one was food, but not the double and white ones. This production has the green arrow, but the green arrow doesn't feature in the Germany production. The Germany production has these trains, and by the way, these trains in this London production are now female. If I ever decide to do a What's the Difference on Starlight Express, I have my work cut out for me. But from what I can tell, a lot of the side character trains' names have been switched around. In previous productions, we had trains from international places, like there was an English train, there was a French train, a Japanese train, which then opens the door to the question of, wait, where is this race happening? Is this our world? Because honestly, watching it and looking at the theming of what they do, it's all like space-like. But then again, I guess you can hand wave all of this away by just saying it's happening in a child's imagination. Where was I? I feel like I've got sidetracked. I feel like every time I try and think about the plot to this musical, I just get more and more confused. Yeah, gender swap. That's what I was going to talk. I was going to speak about the gender swap. Okay. So, this production has changed the genders of 3 of the roles. There's the more obvious ones, which are Greaseball, who in all previous productions has been played by a male and now has been gender swapped to be female, which actually adds some great representation with the relationship between Greaseball and Dinah, now being a lesbian relationship. And if you are angry at the fact that there are lesbian trains, please remember the fact that trains do not have genders. If we were going to have this be accurate, all these trains would need to be non-binary. And now that is actually a production of Starlight Express I would actually really like to see. Ooh. And the gender swap of Popper to Mama. I really like these changes. I've dived into previous versions of this musical to see how they were portrayed. And honestly, I feel like these changes actually do a good service to the story. Because previous versions of Starlight Express seem to have some very rigid gender roles. All of the engines are male. All of the passenger carts are female. And it's very boxed into a gender binary for, you know, things that have no gender. These are, at the end of the day, inanimate objects. And furthering that, they have seemingly gender bent the role of Tacita as well. Now, the performer playing Tacita uses, from what I can tell, he, him pronouns. So I'm looking at this thinking that they are not aiming for this role to be seen as gender neutral or gender fluid, even if their general presentation is more feminine. These gender swaps are put in really well to make it a little bit more inclusive, I would say. A great little touch to make it feel more modern. But let's speak about the music of this show, which I was actually fairly impressed by. I think there's definitely songs that have embedded themselves into my mind more than others. It's actually some of the motifs that they use repeatedly that have been very earwormy to me. And since seeing it on Sunday, I have just been walking around the house just going, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. For a hydrogen. Who is apparently also a new character. The fact that these trains change every single show is so confusing. I'm so confused. And also the motif of Starlight Express in the show as well. These have really stuck with me. Some of this music, I think, is Andrew Webber's finest, actually. I really enjoy a lot of the different musical styles that he goes into. I really enjoy a lot of the music here. It feels very expansive. It feels very space-like. It feels very ethereal. And I think it does a great job at bringing you into this world. Rolling Stock, I think, is one of my favorites in this show. I love the guitar and the beat of this song. I think Whistle at Me is really sweet. A nice moment to get a bit more of a grasp on Rusty and Pearl's relationship, or lack thereof, seeing as the next time we see them, there is no relationship. I don't know. This, again, the plot is very thin. We have Elektra's song, AC/DC, which is very much an 80s glimpse into the future. Which I think is bolstered in this production with some absolutely phenomenal staging I'll speak about later. I love the juxtaposition of Mama's Blues bringing us into a very different style, which, as it says in the name, is the blues. And is a musical style that I think really suits the steam train Mama in this musical. There's Starlight Express, which is one of the ballads in this show that I feel like really spoke to me. I think in general, there's probably one too many ballads in Starlight Express as a whole, but the title number is definitely the best. Every time coming up as such a plea of desperation from Rusty. One of my favorite numbers, which I mentioned previously, is Uncoupled. This bottle number for Dinah, where she can't even bring herself to say the word of what's happened to her. So she decides to instead spell it. It's sweet, it's funny, it's a nice bit of comic relief that happens towards the start of Act 2. There's the race sequences, each time feeling more big and grandiose, bringing us through the highs and lows of these races and keeping the intensity going every time. And probably my favorite number in the show is the finale, which feels completely different to everything else in the show. Tonally, it's completely different as we suddenly go into this massive gospel-inspired finale. But I'm kind of here for it. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. This being Light at the End of the Tunnel, which I actually feel like going into a gospel crowd-pleasing number towards the end actually brings you on side quite well. It's a very eclectic selection of styles, but Webber actually weaves them together quite well. And actually, I feel like it matches the almost timelessness of what this musical's material is trying to push forward. I like how each different type of train has a very distinct musical style. I think it really defines each of them and shows the differences between each of these engines. Yeah, I'm quite a fan of this material. I don't think it quite reaches the heights of some of Webber's other work, like my personal favourites like Evita or Jesus Christ Superstar. But I think there are definitely some highlights here and songs that I go away humming to myself. But if we're being perfectly honest, the thing that sells Starlight, and the reason why I can sit here and safely say I thoroughly enjoyed Starlight, is the set and the design and all of the creative elements that went into this show. Because that, I think, even in the original production, that is what Starlight is about. And oh my god, this production gets it right. So, let's start with the set. So, we are in the Troubadour Wembley Park Theatre. This is actually quite a small space when you compare it to other productions of Starlight Express. So, while it is an intimate space, it actually does feel a lot more intimate when you compare it to what happened before. And especially where I was sat, which I'll use the seating plan to show you where I was sat, I was quite close to the stage, meaning I had people skating all around me, behind me, up, down, left, right, up, straight through the center, round, and flipping all the way around. I think the space is a little bit small, meaning that they can't go for some of the bigger tricks that they have done in previous productions, but there is still a lot of spectacle to the skating and to the choreography here. And I actually think the intimacy helps Starlight Express. With a plot that feels quite thin, it's down to the music and the impact of that and the impact of the staging to make you really feel this show. And being very up close and personal to these performers actually does a great job at making that emotion carry. I love the different sections that we get. There's loads of different pathways around the theatre that these characters can skate all the way through, which is used very well in the racing sequences. And actually, a great touch that they do is they include some live filming in these racing segments. So if you are further close to the front, as I was, you still don't feel like you're losing where the characters are. Because sometimes, if you are a little bit close to the front, you're going to have skaters and action happening behind you. Meaning that if there wasn't any live filming or wasn't any screens, you would be doing a lot of this. Oh, they've gone around here. They've gone around here now. They're over there. And they're all the way back round. Okay, I've got to turn back in my seat. Oh, they're already gone. They're already over here now. Okay, and they're back on stage. So by including that live filming, especially in these moments like the races where it's very high action, high tension, things are changing and moving very quickly, it's very nice to be able to focus on that one point and see the most important things on that screen if you don't have the very wide view of the auditorium. They make great use of revolve on stage. And of course, because this is a Luke Shepherd directed production, of course there is a lift. It wouldn't be a Luke Shepherd show without a lift. He did it in & Juliet, he did it in Little Big Things. We won't talk about Just for One Day. That is the one exception, but I feel like if that transfers, we need to put a lift in it somewhere. And now we have one here, which is used quite sparingly for the show, which means when it does actually happen, it has a huge impact. Only really coming in Rusty's hero moment towards the end of Act 2, and a little bit within the song AC/DC. Where this lift actually really does match the style and the futuristic edge that song has. Something really great about this staging, though, is the screens. These screens add so much to the staging. We have a very long, thin one at the back at the top, above a ramp, which also has screens on it. And I'm assuming the ramp is screens and not projection, because of the quality of the image, but I'm going to use the terms interchangeably, just because I don't know exactly what they use for these. But having so many screens around really builds the atmosphere of the space, really makes it fluid, and allows them to personalize, especially at the start of the musical where you're being introduced to so many different characters, really allows them to personalize each of these locations to the characters. The design of these is so great. I love the character images that they have, a little logo that each character is a sign that is flashing on those screens. One of the best uses of these screens honestly is a fairly simple one, which comes during Act 2, where the entire back wall is decorated to look like a starry sky. And with the lights all around the auditorium, it just makes the space come alive. And of course, there's the racing sequences, where we see the leaderboard and the live filming that I previously spoke about. And this set has even more tricks up its sleeve, with these gorgeous planets coming down in certain sequences, adding that pop of color. All of these smoke machines, I must have counted at least like 6 all around the auditorium, bringing these huge puffs of smoke. And so many stunning pyrotechnics. I love this effect that they keep using throughout the show of these sparks coming from the pyrotechnics, reminding me a little bit when a train is on a track coming to a halt very quickly, and that little spark of the metal hitting metal. And that's just the set. Just the set alone is incredible work. And then you've got the costume design by the amazing Gabriella Slade, who you may remember from doing the costumes for 6. Now, I have seen some criticism levied to these, mainly coming from people who are fans of the original designs. And honestly, I think that these are a nice modern version of the Starlight Express original costumes. You can clearly see the influence of Gabriella Slade's work from 6 here, but being blended with the train-like aesthetic to actually create something that feels very unique. I love the sharp edges on all of these costumes. I love the color schemes of everyone, similar to 6 being given unique colors between them. Do they look massively like trains? No, but I would argue neither do the originals. I would honestly compare them a little bit to action figures. I think that's what they really do look like, especially with the paneling on all of this armor-like costume. They look like I could pick them up and pose them, which I feel like actually leans in very much to the style of the show being very much a child playing with his toys. And I think there's a lot of great extra touches within them. The lights, the logos. I love the backpacks being very like streetwear, but actually being designed to look very much like a part that you would see on a train. And of course, there's one of the most impressive bits of costuming, which comes from Elektra and Elektra's minions. I don't know what they are. The backup dancers, let's call them that. Which is this one inflatable piece which they use in the middle of the song, which is very impressive. I won't spoil it completely because it's a great moment, but oh, it's pretty. All of this paired with this absolutely gorgeous lighting design, the fantastic choreography, taking into account all of these performers on wheels, learning how to roller skate this show as well. They can't go as big as they have done in other productions, but they use a lot of great techniques to still make it feel larger than life. The spectacle of this show is a 5 out of 5. And I can absolutely see myself at 10 years old going to see this and just immediately falling in love with theatre. Because honestly, I think that's what the intention of Starlight Express is. It's meant to show people what theatre can do. It's meant to be big and flashy and colourful so that it can foster that love of theatre in young people. And by looking at the reaction of children in that audience, I think that this production managed to do that just as well as previous productions have done. But let's talk about this cast. Now, this cast are actually fairly new. We are seeing a lot of performers make professional debuts in this cast, and they are all fantastic. First off, I just want to give a massive congratulations for the entire ensemble as a whole, the entire cast of the show. They make this look easy. This roller skating, the dancing, the movement, the fluidity, the tricks, they put it off so well. They are given this absolutely mammoth task of a show, and they do it so well. But let's talk about our leads, starting with Jeevan Breach, who plays Rusty. Jeevan's performance is really sweet. You really get that sense of Rusty's determination as a character. You really believe that relationship and that care that he has for Pearl. Through just the little glances that he does when he looks at her, he carries the weight of the betrayal that he feels when Pearl decides to leave him as well. It's an absolutely great protagonistic portrayal. Jade Marvin as Mama is one of my standouts from the entire show. A phenomenal voice on her. Fantastic. And she brings a very much needed maternal voice to this show. Al Not as Greaseball is fantastic. I adore how cocky she is. She plays the villain so well that I actually end up rooting for her more than I do Rusty at points. Tom Pigram as Elektra has so much power behind their performance. They use these fantastic, very rigid movements that makes them feel very futuristic. And every time they're on stage, they take up the entire space. So much presence in one performance. Kana Monticello plays Pearl, who, as I said, is a character who's a little bit underwritten. But I feel like Kana's performance actually delivers such a sincerity about that role that makes it easier to root for her as a character. With a key highlight for me being her performance of Make Up My Heart. Eve Humphrey as Dinah has such brilliant comedic timing. She has a smaller role in this show, but takes up her space as much as she can. I absolutely adored her. She's someone who wins over the audience so easily. Someone else who I think has a really charming performance is Jaden Vinge, who plays Hydra. So charming, so lovable. It's that smile that he always gives as he rides in. There's a certain confidence about him that is so endearing. And then there's our child performer, who, at my performance, was played by Christian Batacci. In previous versions of Starlight Express, the role of the child and moving on to Control, is normally a voiceover, as well as the child's mother. But this production is actually really clever, and I really like this choice, where they have the child actually be physically present through the entire show, and has his mother also appear at the start, and then multi-roles as Mama. That's really clever. That's really cute. And I'm actually really surprised that this is a decision that was made with this production. It feels like something that I would have expected to be in every single production, because it just works so well naturally. Christian is a very sweet addition to the show, often coming in at moments of heightened tension and being a sort of comfort to the characters. A nice little hint of this child essentially always being the one who's pulling the strings. This is his imagination, his story. It's a clever piece of direction within this production, and a great use of this child actor. Starlight Express is a musical that surprised me. I think there are places where you can see its age, and obviously it is a very style over substance musical, in every single meaning of the phrase. But through clever changes with casting, from the scale that it builds from the set, the costumes, the lighting, the choreography, the direction, everything comes together to create this brilliant showcase of what live theatre can do. And I think Starlight Express succeeds at what its aim is, to foster a love of theatre in a younger generation, which I think makes it easier to forgive the flaws of some of the material. Because I can say without a doubt that young people going to see this show are going to be enthralled by this race. But what do you think? Have you seen Starlight Express either in Germany, in the original West End and Broadway versions, or in this new version? What are your thoughts? Let me know all of them in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on the screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. I also have links to other socials and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!